Hello again, this is Sandra with Life Over 60 podcast. Today I want to talk about places within my heart. In 1984, we took a trip, as I have told you before, down the Nile on a train that took us to Aswan, Luxor, and all of the towns along the Nile. While I was on this train, I met so many interesting people, and I want to tell you the story of a woman that I met in the club car when I was searching for a good cup of strong coffee because I had just awakened from a nap. My husband and son were sleeping, and I was just looking to energize myself a little bit. And I went into the club car, looked around. It was very crowded and a little smoky. People were laughing and playing music and having a great time. And I finally found a seat next to a middle-aged woman. And I asked her if I could sit down. "Do you mind?" I asked, gesturing to the empty chair next to her. "What? Oh, no, yes, it's quite all right." She took off her reading glasses and smoothed her tinted red hair that had been disturbed by the uprooting of her glasses. I quickly studied her round, colorful face as I seated myself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you, but I am interested right now in just a big, strong, serious cup of coffee." She put down her book, folded her reading glasses, and inserted them between its pages to mark the place. "No, that's quite all right. I was just reading to pass the time. I'm traveling by myself, and books are suitable companions, I find, even when dining alone. One doesn't have to pick up the check, and the conversations are most delightful." I smiled and nodded in agreement. How clever she is, I thought. "I'm on a holiday of sorts. My grandfather came to Aswan from England as a young man to help build the old Aswan Dam in 1889. He fell in love with the country, went home, and his stories inspired my father so much that when he received his degree from the university, he came here to work. My father worked for the British as an engineer for years." "Oh, wasn't it hard on your mother? Being so far away from home for such a long time?" "Oh, Mother never lived here. This was before Mother. My father fell in love with a beautiful young Egyptian girl from a very wealthy family. Father was very dashing and well-educated, but it didn't matter. He was a foreigner, and an Englishman to boot. They were very much in love, but her family would have none of it, and they sent her away. He tried to find her, but had no luck." "Oh, how awful. He must have been devastated." "He was, I suspect. I suspect her family was also very powerful politically, for soon after her father was called home to England by the government, he was left vowing to come back and find her, but his papers were never renewed. He never could return." "Well, then he must have met your mother later." "Oh, he knew her before, but she was very young when he left Egypt. My mother was the vicar's daughter. Naturally, father was beside himself when he returned home, and he lost all will to go about living again. So much so that he even lost his beliefs." "What, in God or life itself?" "Oh, no doubt, both. My grandfather took pity upon my poor father and gave him the spiritual encouragement to carry on. And in time, as my mother blossomed into womanhood, my father slowly fell in love with her. My mother may have healed his broken heart, but he never forgot his Egyptian love. Oh, what makes you say that? I wondered if her mother had sensed his distance at times. Well, I don't even know about her until after my father died. Mother never mentioned her to me either. Father outlived mother and was lost without her. No one could console him, not even me. He died soon after. No apparent cause. I'm convinced now he died of a broken heart. After losing both the loves of his life, he didn't care to go on. Well, is that possible? Yes, of course. Medical science has indicated so in many cases. After he died, and as part of his will, he left a sealed envelope with instructions that it was to go to me and opened only after my mother's death, should he pass before her. I was indeed curious, but I couldn't gather the fortitude to open it immediately. I was still mourning for my mother, and now my father. It was too much, just too much for me at the time. I wasn't ready. Oh, how did I understand that? How many times I'd postponed reality because I couldn't face it at that moment. But, of course, you eventually did. Yes, I did in time. She motioned for the waiter to come. I'm having a cup of tea. Would you care to join me with more coffee? No, I'm fine, thank you. Oh, would you like to continue your reading? I didn't mean for you to stop. I'm so sorry. Well, aren't you a little curious about the letter? She smiled mischievously at me as the waiter brought her tea and placed the small round table near a closed book. Well, yes, of course, very curious. The caffeine had finally kicked in for me. After some time, I did open the letter. As I pulled the letter from its envelope, a small gold necklace fell from it. I recognized it right away. It was a cartouche, but I didn't know the name. In the letter itself, my father related his story about the Egyptian girl and told me that the necklace belonged to her. Her name was Bastet. His instructions to me were to travel to Egypt and return the necklace to her. He asked me to find Bastet, but should it be that she was not alive or that I could not find her, then his instructions to me were, and I use his exact words, take her necklace to Aswan, and at sunset from a felucca in the middle of the Nile, give it its freedom. Tell the river of life to find her and return it to Bastet. She paused and took a sip of tea. Well, did you do it? Did you go or find her? Well, yes and no. Well, what do you mean? Well, I found her family. Her father had arranged a marriage for her 1 year after my father returned to England. This marriage produced one child, a daughter named Fatima. By the time I had made my journey, Bastet had died. I found Fatima at the University of Cairo. She was a lovely woman, a professor of philosophy, quite emancipated, although it really didn't surprise me. Well, I took a chance and I told her my story, and in the end, I went against my father's wishes. I didn't give the Nile Bastet's cartouche. I gave it to Fatima, her daughter. You were right. I would have done the same thing. Did you ever see her again? Oh, yes. We're both alone now, you see. but through our parents we now have each other. She comes to England for the holiday whenever she can, and I visit her here once a year. It's really been splendid, you know, like having a long-lost sister. Oh, what a touching story. But I have to ask one more thing, if I may. What were you doing in Aswan? I mean, didn't you say Fatima lives in Cairo? Yes, but over the years I continued to feel guilty about not honoring my father's wish about the cartouche. Then Fatima and I came up with a solution that is most marvelous, that I think Father would have approved of it. Brilliant, really. Yesterday in Aswan, just before sunset, I took a felucca out into the Nile, and as the sun was setting behind Elephantine Island, I dropped my father's university ring into the water and asked the Nile to carry to Bastet. She was a very interesting woman, and our meeting and our conversation reminded me of a quote by Robert Spence Lowell. After loving you so much, can I forget you for eternity and have no other choice? Thank you for coming again and sharing this story with me from places within my heart that is included in my journey along the river of life. Hope to see you soon.